Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I thought as I've got to look and possibly water the resting Dendrobiums, I thought I'd take a look at them together today, just to see if there's any signs of things. There shouldn't be really. I'm not expecting any signs of buds or anything like that on the resting Dendrobiums for probably another 4 or 5 weeks, but you never know. I mean, I did start their rest at a more appropriate time this year, so we'll have a look at those as I go. Before I start, you'll have to put up with the noise. We've got yet another storm going across at the moment. It's finished with the rain for a bit because it was heavy enough that made filming impossible. I'd have had to shout. We're just getting a sequence of storms at the moment. My sleep level is down considerably. 2 nights ago, hardly any sleep at all. The roar of the wind and the hammering of the rain was not conducive to dozing off, shall we say. And we had some more of that last night as well. And it looks like the weather is brightening up, but I don't think this wind's going to drop for a while. So if you see anybody's roof whiz past the window or anything, you know, it's just yet another storm going past. It's just one after the other at the moment. It's where the jet stream is, apparently. So we just got a succession of low pressures queuing up to get in and stop me getting some kip. Couple of things before we go. Somebody asked me to see if I can do a close-up of my Rhyncho stylus. The light's not too bad, despite the noise. To get a close-up of an individual bloom, I would have to get the tripod out. Everything in bloom on the 8th is coming up. That's going to be a quick video this time of year. But nonetheless, because of the lack of bloom, shall we say, quite a few of them are of the small nature, so I'll probably get the tripod out for that one, but not today. I have actually got some things to do. But that is an attractive bloom. It's not the best of spikes, it's a bit short, but for a first time bloom I'm happy that it's bloomed. That's the good bit. So that's that. Somebody said, is your Cymbidium open yet? Well, not quite. The spikes are pushing on nicely. I don't know how much bigger they need to get before they open. A nice big fat mealybug there. Let me correct that. Nice big dead fat mealybug. Not so fat now either. Still get the odd few lurking around, but nothing to panic about. And I haven't seen scale for a while, although I did find a few on one of the Tolumnias the other day, so they got dealt with. So I'm pretty on top of the old bug situation, but at this time of year, they're not doing very well, so I don't have to keep up with any great pace. Yeah, Cymbidium not open yet. Looking at the colour on these buds, I think what we're going to get is quite a deep pink around the edges. So if you look, the deep pink colour on the buds is towards the tip, or when those open, you know, those will be the tips of the sepals. But what's inside, who knows? We still have to wait and see. It's just that game, unfortunately. Somebody's been watching an awful lot of my old videos, which is, I'm happy with that, and people that, you know, go back and have a look, that's great. Unfortunately, when they leave a comment, I don't know what they're talking about, because I don't know which video it is, so I'm having to go back and look at some of them myself to see, you know, to find a suitable answer. But somebody watched the video of the RHS show where I spotted this Oncidium varicosum. It's the Roger ZI, so it caught my eye because of its name, and they said, is it still okay? Can you hang on a minute, somebody at the door. False alarm, it's just the wind banging something around. There's an awful lot of things at the moment sound like there's someone at the door, and it's nothing to do with me, it's other stuff. Anyway, back to where I was. You know, they said, have you still got it? Has it ever bloomed again? Well, yes, it's in bloom now. As Oncidium type blooms go, these are large, and the dark colour will be lightened by the camera, but it's not far off black. It is of the deepest maroon you can imagine, and that is one of my nicest Oncidium, true Oncidium types. And having just said that, it's not an Oncidium anymore, it's a Gomessa, I think it is. And when it arrived in its new category, there was already a varicosum there, so it's now Varicosa. I wish they'd stop messing about. Sherry Baby's opened, and as I came in here this morning, I did get a slight whiff of chocolate, but given that the blooms have only just opened, you know, give it a day or two, preferably with a little bit of sun, and it'll be off. Right, back to the subject. I'm going to get each plant down in turn of the resting Dendrobiums. That's that row up there and everything down the far end of there. That's the long cane stuff. I've had to put them there to literally accommodate the length of the canes. So we'll have a quick look over them, you know, see what's going on, one at a time obviously. Okay, this one is Loddigessii, and this is a relatively new acquisition. So this is its first winter, and not knowing its background or its history, it could be that the plant is effectively out of season and was kept growing perhaps last time round when it should have been resting, because quite honestly this is not really showing any signs of doing what it ought to be doing this time of year, which is yellowing leaves falling off, and it's not doing it. This one has started to desiccate very slightly. Not a lot, just very slightly. You can start seeing the ribbed pattern on the canes is now starting to become ridged, yeah, rather than just a nice rounded cane with stripes on. So that can have some water today. It's not going to get much. With a plant like this, I'm okay. The main moss section in the centre I'll try and keep dry, and literally I can just pour some water over the edge of the mount where the bare roots are and just get a little bit of hydration in there by just sort of going around the edges. I haven't watered the resting Dendrobiums, physically put water on them in any shape or form for 16 days now. So that's quite a long time, but they should be in their deepest rest at the moment. You know, I mean, come the middle of February, I should be thinking about bringing them out of their rest if they don't do it on their own. But as that's a new plant, if it doesn't bloom as a consequence of resting this year, I won't actually be that upset about it on the grounds it's new to me. But it's not a bad sized plant. I've seen smaller plants than that with blooms on, so it's not doing bad. But yeah, no sign of life in the form of buds or anything yet. Little bit of desiccation starting to show, which I will promptly stop. Now, as I said, this session is combined with not only getting each plant down and looking at it together, but it also involves watering as and when I think necessary. And it's not on any form of regular basis now, it's a look at the plant. If it's not starting to desiccate or showing signs of dehydration, it goes straight back on its hook with no water. Humidity's good in here, temperatures are right down. It's the best rest I can do, and I got told that every opportunity I get I should make sure my orchid mug is featured. So there we go, featured orchid mug with the appropriate stuff inside, which I try not to let get cold. Right, this one is a Kiki, believe it or not, despite its size. This came from Alberto in sunny Italy. I haven't had it that long, and the fact that it's a Kiki, in theory I'm not resting this, but in theory I've split the difference. So what I do with this one is, instead of just giving it a little trickle round those roots, when I water it, I water it. You know, the theory is that I'm trying to grow it on because it's a Kiki, but because of its size and the time of year, it's probably not going to put out any new growths. But Alberto, if you're watching, we have buds. These are definitely buds starting to form. Yeah, hang on, if I get round at the side, you can see them sticking out. Yeah, so we've got a bud here, 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 another one round the back there, another one in amongst the last few remaining leaves. We have buds. So unless anything goes dramatically wrong, this one is going to bloom, and boy am I looking forward to that. The only reason I got this Kiki was because I was dribbling and drooling over Alberto's version of this plant back in the year when it was an absolute spectacle. Absolutely stunning, Dendrobium aphyllum. And at the time he said, I'll see if I can send you a Kiki. Well, it was a while coming, it's here now, and it's going to bloom. But it's highly unlikely with that number of sprouts coming out of that cane that they're going to be kikis. I mean, maybe one of them might be, but I think that's going to bloom. So that may well be the first. It might be the last out of what we look at today anyway, but yeah. I mean, it's shown no signs of growth at the base, but I wasn't expecting it to. I'm not expecting that to happen until the longer days and the warmth comes back. But we do have buds. Yay! One success. Now this one is a strange one because of the conflict of interest. Everywhere I've read about this plant, well, it's actually a hybrid, it's Jenkinsii crossed with aggregatum, but everywhere that I've read about the conditions about this plant is that it naturally desiccates and that it should be expected to do so. Now that one has desiccated considerably since the last time I looked at it, but it is supposed to do that. There's no sign of any spikes or anything yet. Decision now is, do I give that a drop of water and try and plump it up a bit? Well, the answer is yes, I will. Again, it's in an ideal set of circumstances. The bulk of the moss under the mass of the plant can stay dry, but by pouring the water around the edge, yeah, I can just get a bit of hydration in the bare roots without getting that moss wet. So it's not going to get a hell of a drink, but it is going to get some water. It's pushing along the lines of going a little bit too far. And yeah, next time we look at it, we'll see if it plumped up a bit. But as I say, it hasn't had any water for some time now. So we'll give that one a drop and see what happens. But as I said, this one isn't buds, this one's actually spikes. This produces quite short spikes with a number of flowers on. Yet to be seen, relatively new to me. This is its first winter. So we'll see what we get out of that, if anything. Now this one is Dendrobium pussycatii. It's a unique species. It's the only one, and he's standing right underneath the plant. I'm just going to water because he's just woke up. Yeah, even the cats can't sleep with this flipping racket with the wind. What you up to? Hey, what you up to? Right, next one on the list is Dendrobium findlayanum, and this is the one with the weird shaped canes where each node is effectively looks more like a pseudo bulb. It is a strange shape. Never bloomed for me. That's the old bit of the plant, that's what I bought. These bits over here are what I grew the previous year, and then these three canes over here are what I grew this year. So I have got progression here in size of the pseudo bulbs, but I still don't know what a mature plant would look like. I don't know anyone else that's got this one. Anyway, these bulbs are slightly desiccated. They went into the rest looking like that, so they haven't changed. They haven't got worse, shall we say. The new canes are not showing any signs of desiccation yet. They're still smooth, they're still shiny. And what's that on the end of my finger? Well, last year it did that and it turned out to be a frickin' kiki. That one's got one near the tip as well, and it's actually got one there as well. So this one is showing signs of doing something. If it repeats its performance from last year, they may well be kikis. And they say if you water too soon, you can turn buds into kikis. I disagree with that in real terms. I think once a plant makes up its mind it's growing a bud, it can't change its mind. But what you can do is influence it before it starts pushing out the nubbins. Yeah, so quite honestly, I'm not going to water that one. 16 days without water, it's not desiccated, so you're not getting any. And yeah, we'll keep our eye on those. It looks like there's one just starting there too. If that blooms, I shall do a wahoo, because I've had this plant quite a while now. It never blooms. I haven't even seen what it's supposed to look like. Knowing me, and it's a dendrobium, they're probably yellow. I do have a thing about yellows and oranges into the reds. But anyway, it looks like we may get something on this one. Yeah, I'm hoping I get blooms on every single resting dendrobium this year, with the possible exception of the Lodigessii, simply because I cannot do a better rest than I've done this year. I can't drop the temperature any lower, simply because the rest of the plants in here would suffer. Yeah? It's as cool as I'm going to allow it. The rest started earlier, far earlier than last year, so they're having the proper period of rest, and I'm not giving in. It's difficult when you own a plant and you look at it and you think, oh, I haven't watered that for 16 days and I'm still not going to water it. I won't even look at this plant for another week. And it is difficult to control yourself. It's difficult for me. But I'm determined to do it properly. I mean, there's even a sign of a new growth here. Yeah? Well, they say, when you see the new growths, start watering. Well, not on your Nelly. Not when these canes are not desiccating. So that one's on hold, with the possibility of some buds. And that one's good. Now this one's the actual species Jenkinsii, so a genuine species, not a hybrid. Jenkinsii and aggregatum and a couple of others are all incredibly similar. They vary in the size of the bulbs, slight shape of the leaves, but they're all basically the same looking, sort of looking plant. Now this one's got no sign of any spikes, the same as the hybrid. There's no sign of any. The bulbs are desiccating as they're supposed to do. No, I'm sorry, I'm desperately hunting in the hope that I might see a spike coming out from somewhere. Now this one has bloomed for me. It bloomed early spring in 2017, so last year, at the appropriate time, and it had two little tiny spikes, each of which had 2 flowers each. And that's it. I've had this plant quite a long time, so I was pleased that it bloomed. But I'd like to see it do quite a bit better this year, having had a proper rest. So I'm not... Actually, I will probably just put a little tiny bit of water on those bare roots down in there. Yeah? Because that's the part of the plant that's the base where a lot of the newer growths are. I don't want to get the centre of the plant wet. There's a few bare roots up the top there where I could trickle some water over. So that's going to get a little trickle, but nothing more than that. The desiccation on those bulbs is expected and not excessive. That is what they're supposed to look like. So a trickle for you and no sign of spikes yet. And it is spikes on this one, not buds. You are looking for a spike extension with the buds forming on the end. So different principle. And this one is Dendrobium primulinum. I'll say it now, but any of these that we look at, the resting Dendrobiums that have actually got some blooms on, I will do pop-ups. But this one was nearly lost completely last year when I tried to rest it. In that dry atmosphere, reducing the water down on this one did not do it any good at all. It wasn't strong enough, so I nearly lost this plant. So even though this is getting rested, it's not getting forced, so this one will get a little bit of water, not a lot, but it will have a drop. There's no sign of buds on these canes at all. They're not really desiccated, but these are not the right size canes yet. It should produce better canes than this, but you know, it spent the last growing season trying to get some canes after nearly dying. So the fact that the thing's still alive is a bonus. And if this one doesn't bloom, I won't actually be that upset. I'm just pleased that I saved the plant, and hopefully now with a root system to go with the new growths, this coming growing season that should push on at a rate of knots and hopefully get a nice strong plant to go into the rest. But this one will get some water because it's not a strong plant. I don't want to do that to plants that are a little weak. So a bit of water for you. No sign of buds on that one yet. I'm showing this one. This is Dendrobium senile, the hairy one. Now this is a true resting type dendrobium, and under normal circumstances during its rest period it will dump virtually every leaf on the plant, and then it just looks like a load of bare tarantula legs. But because I got this this year, and you know, it got unmounted and remounted, I wanted to build up a strong healthy plant before I attempt to rest this. So although it's a true resting type, it isn't getting it this year. I'm just treating it like my non-resting mount, so it gets watered every second or third day, and occasionally gets a bit of feed, but not at high levels. So although it's a resting type, not this time. If that blooms, I'll be incredibly surprised, because it's had no form of rest at all. It's getting the bright light, and it's got the lower temperatures, but it's not getting its water reduced dramatically, so it's not having a proper rest. So that blooms, I'll be very surprised. If it's going to bloom at all, it'll be on... That's what I mean by looking like a bare tarantula leg. That big fat bare cane and this one down here, those are what the canes look like at the point it normally pushes the spikes out, rather than these nice green canes with green leaves sticking out. So I'll be very surprised if it blooms. But you never know. Orchids can surprise you and do weird things. But if it blooms without a rest, then I know that next year when I come to rest it, I don't have to give it a severe rest and shrivel it all up and necessarily drop all the leaves. But that's next year. Let's worry about this year first, so that I'm not resting that one at the moment. Right, we're getting to the bigger stuff now, where I'm actually in the lounge trying to film this to get it all in. It is a beautiful plant. It's grown well for me, this one. It didn't start out life very good, but it's picked up quite dramatically. That got remounted back in the year because the roots started to fail, and all I could put it down to was just broken down moss turning a bit acidic. And because it was in the growing season, it was remaining very wet, you know, feed and water well. I wonder how many times I've actually said that, but I'm going to keep going because I mean it. But this one's a strange one, because although it's classed as a resting type, you know, drier winter rest, it's not an early spring bloomer. This one bloomed for me last year in May. Well, those blooms were not influenced by that winter rest. So this one gets a rest because of where it lives, not because it needs it. Yeah? So this one will get watered today. As I said, I mean, quite honestly, these canes are still trying to grow. They're trying to survive mealybug attack. Look at the size of that one. Ugh. Well, these plants haven't been down for quite a while, so to only have one mealybug on it's not doing bad. It's too cold for them to do well. But I do still have to keep my eye on plants, you know, they're still about. But this one grew quite a few new roots into its new moss. Those are the old roots sticking out the top. And this is the type of dendrobium that loses a lot of its roots during the winter and then puts out a new set the following year. So that's actually not that unusual for this plant. But some of these canes are still attempting to grow a new leaf. So you can see what I mean about, although it's classed as needing a dry winter rest, it might come from a place, I'm not bothering to look it up, where the winter rest and the real drier period comes later and perhaps doesn't really kick in till, say, the middle of January into February, which might be why the blooms are triggered later. But this did bloom for me last year, and I was well pleased. That was its first attempt, and it wasn't bad. But there's no signs of buds or anything on here, and if there was, I would be incredibly surprised, because it would be well out of season. As I say, this is a late spring bloomer, so I've just spotted another mealybug. Well, as I say, it's 16 days since these plants came down. There's another two little ones there. While they're at this level, I'm quite happy to just kill them with my thumb. I'm not getting sprays out on a plant like this, but that one will get watered, because the only reason I think that gets a rest is because of where it comes from, but I don't think that rest triggers the blooms. They're too late in the year, you know. We're right up at heading in towards summer in May, you know. We've got much longer days and good temperatures, so this is an oddity, not quite the same as the others, but that will get watered today. I had to step right back to get the full length of this one in as well. I mean, this has got 2/3 of a bare stem, which is 2 foot long, and then a foot full of leaves at the bottom. This was this year's growth, basically, a lovely big long cane. This cane is desiccated, yeah? Now I got a hassle with this one because that cane is starting to desiccate and yet it's still growing. So I'm going to have to water this whether I like it or not. This was another one I nearly lost by resting it. Went into the rest far too weak basically. But I always had a problem with this one because it started to push this new growth up late in the season. If I don't give this some water now and again, that's going to stop growing, and that's nowhere near the length of cane it needs to get to. And this one's still actively growing too. So I'll water this one simply because this year's growth, the one that's most likely to have some blooms, is starting to get a bit desiccated, despite the fact it's still attempting to grow. Complicated? But this one, since it was remounted, has put out a nice root system. And, well, it's still growing in the winter. What can you do? If I don't want to stall those new growths, then I'm going to have to apply a small amount of water. I'm not going to get a lot, but I'm going to have to water it. I can't let this cane shrivel to the point of losing it. Yeah? So that's what we'll do with that one. I thought, did I say what it was? It's Dendrobium glomeratum. So, yeah, halfway house with this one. It's neither resting nor, well, it is trying to grow. So it's definitely out of season. It's definitely not in its proper place at the moment. It's just not stopping growing at the right time of year. And pushing up that new cane towards the end of the year was over the moon that it did it, because otherwise I'd have only got one new growth this year. So to get a second one was good, but not really at the right time of year. But what can you do? Back in the lounge again. Some of this big stuff is just impossible to film without getting... I mean, I'm, 5 foot away from this, and I'm only just getting it all in. The canes are well over a metre long, basically. It's a big plant. Now, this was a new acquisition this year. This is Dendrobium anosmum, and it's always been one of my favourite resting type Dendrobiums. But up until now, I had the semi-alba one, which is under the hedge. I lost it. I managed to rescue 2 kikis off of it. Let's just get them. So they're not dead yet. There is green on them. It's a bit dry actually. I'll put that there. Remind me to give that a bit of water because it's not pot watering day today. Anyway, back to the anosmum. It decided to push up 2 new growths towards the end of the year, but I played a game with this one. This had I'll get down on my knees, things I do for you lot. This had a long rhizome, yeah, long continuous rhizome with all these canes dropping down at a regular interval. Yeah, that's how I got it. And some of these canes have definitely had it. They're due to come off, but I'll wait till the new growths, the next lot of new growths push out. But what I did with this one is I actually cut the rhizome halfway along to see if the older part of the plant would shoot out. Well, it has. So in theory, I've now got 2 plants there. And I'm just having a look. If that is what I think it is, yes it is. That is either a cluster of mealybugs or an outbreak of scale. You can see all the white at the base of that plant. So that needs dealing with properly. But yeah, I was in a bit of a quandary with this one as to whether to put it into a full rest, given that I don't know whether it had a rest last winter or not. I've got it this year. But obviously this growth is pushing on quite nicely. Now, unfortunately, that's stopped growing. So that cane's now stuck. It's not going to get any bigger than that, and I don't think that one will either. It might push another leaf out, we never know. But this is the cane, the proper cane. This is the proper growth that I grew this year. It's doing its autumn thing at the moment. That's expected. That yellow starts up here, gradually moves down until by sort of spring there probably won't be any leaves left on that cane. That's its latest growth. In theory, that's where it's going to bloom. But that's it, break your neck, why don't you? It's possible it could bloom on older canes, and I could be mistaken, but I don't know whether these nubbins were on this cane when I got it, or whether there is something starting to push out. and only time's going to tell, because I physically cannot remember whether this cane had... See, they look a brown colour, not green, so they may not be buds. They may just be things that happened in the past that never took off. But this is the cane I'm expecting to bloom, if it's going to. And I don't see any signs of buds on there. That's about the only thing I could say. If you look on the end of my finger, there's little tiny swelling there. But not having had the true... mine's gone blank. This thing, anosmum, having not had the true anosmum in the past, I don't really know at what section of the nodes the buds push out, but there's something lurking under the skin of that cane. And come to think of it, the same thing's happening there. So maybe we've got embryo buds just thinking about forming on that cane, and the possibility of something on that one too. I'm doubting this, quite honestly. I think those sort of stumps were there on the cane. But this cane could still push blooms out. This one could. This one could. The other three won't. They're totally desiccated and need coming off at my earliest opportunity. So that's Dendrobium anosmum. If I get blooms on this, I will be well pleased, as it's, you know, this is the first... I haven't had it a year yet, and this is its first winter with me. It's done a flipping good root system this year, I'll give it that. And the fact that the latest growths are not desiccated in any shape or form, that's not getting any water. So, decision made. Right, so this is the last one to look at today. This is Dendrobium nesta. And slight element of disappointment, but I can't really knock it. I'll explain what I mean. Last year it grew this cane. Yeah, right down there. That's a good metre long. I thought something had been eating the cane. It looks like it's just rubbed up against something. But that cane bloomed over its entire length. So it can't bloom anymore. That one's had it. These were the old canes on it when I got it, and they had already bloomed. So on the old part of the plant, it's not going to bloom. And the little bit of disappointment, the year started off well. It pushed out 3 new growths and started a good root system. So I was over the moon. I thought, "Ray, 3 canes. And if they perform like the last one did, boy, is that going to be a showstopper." But they didn't get as long. I mean, they have finished growing now. We've got terminal leaves on all 3 of them. Leaves, sorry. And it's in the middle of doing autumn on this year's growths. Sorry, last year's growths. I keep forgetting we've clicked over the year. But, you know, let's say last growing season's canes. So they're starting to drop their leaves. There is no reason why that's not going to bloom. No reason at all. And if it blooms on all 3 canes, it'll be a spectacle. But the canes are not as large as the previous year. However, that's a much bigger, stronger plant to take into this coming growing season. So who knows how many new growths we'll get. It's got a much better root system than it had before. Anyway, so no sign of buds on this one yet. And again, this is a slightly later bloomer. It's not an early spring bloomer. It's not in the nobly category like end of February, beginning of March. It's more like an April thing with this one. I think it was April, and it tailed off into May as well. But one of my favourite individual blooms on this one, the fragrance is stunning. It's like raspberries. It really is like a raspberry sauce that you put on your ice cream. It's got that real fresh raspberry smell to it. It's gorgeous and lovely depth of colour on it. So if all 3 of those canes bloom, I'll be over the moon. I would have liked the canes to have grown longer. But yeah, you take what you get, basically. I could analyse it and think, well, did I give it enough food, feed and water well? Did I do that as well as I could have done? Or is it just that with the inner strength of that plant, it only had the strength to push those canes out that big, as it was trying to do 3 at once? So we'll see. But no sign of buds or anything on that yet. Wasn't expecting any. And the fact that the canes aren't desiccated in any shape or form, I won't water that today either. That can wait. Okay, so that's the lot. The only other resting Dendrobium I've got is actually a nobile. And we've seen this so many times lately. The buds are starting to move on virtually every cane, including some of the old ones, so it is going to have an awful lot of blooms. There's only a couple of older canes that have already fully bloomed left on there. At least I thought they'd fully bloomed, and blow me, that one's pushed out a couple at the top. You'd have to fight to stop this thing blooming. It just is a star performer. So it's not fully resting at the moment, it's forming buds. So it gets well, last time I watered the pots it had a little bit of water, no feed. And I'm watching those buds carefully, and the instant they start to extend away from the cane, which then becomes a spike, because they have 2, 3 or 4 blooms on the end of that, so once it moves it's a spike. At the moment they're nubbins in my terminology, so they're not buds, they're nubbins. They will turn into spikes, and as soon as I see those shapes leaving those canes I'll start watering it a bit more. Okay, so that's the resting Dendrobiums, an update, and yeah, enjoy your growing. Just going over those now, I feel a bit more spring-like. The sun's just come out as well, albeit virtually setting because it's late in the day. But yeah, signs of things starting to move in some cases unexpected places. But yeah, I'll see you next time. As I say, not everybody grows Dendrobiums, and Dendrobiums in the title, and it's mainly Dendrobiums. If you can always switch off. As I've always said, viewing is not compulsory. If it's on a subject that doesn't interest you, great. Oh, while we're on the subject of viewers, I magically clicked across the 2,500 mark. Well, sometime over the last couple of days. I didn't really notice when, I just happened to notice it this morning. So, to all the new people that have joined the channel, welcome. I hope you stick around. You will get a variety of videos. They're not all about the plants in this grow room. Come the better weather and stuff, I shall be out and about on field trips. Native orchids, butterflies, nature type things. I do some of those as well. I also do the odd bonsai video now and again, but there's not much goes on with them. As a hobby, there's nothing to do most of the time, so I prefer the orchids. But I have got some, you know, so, a few different things, and this year I do plan on doing spotlight videos where I'll pick either one plant or a little group of plants that effectively are in essence the same treatment, same temperature ranges, same light requirements and things like that, and just go over them and do a brain dump, everything I know about those plants. I don't do that sort of thing very often, but I've been told off by a couple of people I should. The few that I have done, they've said you should do more of these. Well, I'm always open to ideas. If you got an idea for a video for me to do and I can practically do it, you know, in other words, physically be able to do it, have the appropriate plants and stuff like that, I'm glad to have a go. You know, otherwise I'm trying to think up all the ideas, aren't I? And I'm sure some of you have got some great ideas out there. Well, unless you tell me, I don't know. So just leave a comment. I'm happy for new ideas to come in, things to do, perhaps slightly differently or totally differently. But we'll see how we go. And thanks for dropping by. See you next time.